Have you ever heard of the play Death of the Salesman by Arthur Miller? If you have, you would notice how the main character, Willie Loman, often goes in these flashbacks whenever he's put into this sort of deep stress, or when he's at a point where he just can't handle things going on right now. He sort of resets back into his mind and goes back to a easier time when he was more happy. Whenever he's upset at his job, or when he's upset that things in his family life aren't really the way that he hoped for, like how his youngest son didn't really become the big hopeful, well-liked success that he would have thought it would, or how he didn't really get the sort of big hands-on job that he wanted. That seems very similar to how a lot of people seem to suffer from mental health. And it seems like you could take Willie's struggle of mental health and apply it to what others are going through in their own mental health struggles. Many people suffer from mental health in their own ways. Sometimes they might have a boss who doesn't treat them very well, or they just have this job that they don't like very much, and it just sort of eats away at their soul, and they just sort of become just kind of embittered to everything and whatnot. But I think what's very interesting about Willie is that he sort of checks a few of these boxes. On one hand, he has this job that he doesn't like. He rather would like a job where he's very hands-on, very, gets to use his hands to work on a lot of things. On the other hand, you see his mental health eat away whenever he thinks about how his youngest son didn't necessarily have that big life that he hoped, real life that he hoped for. He was this very well-liked football player, but then after flunking math, he really just didn't really become anybody. And there's the neighborhood kid Bernard, who was seen as this nerd. Like, yeah, he's not referred to him. He was sort of like that guy who's like, yeah, that nerd who nobody really likes a whole lot. He became this big, successful businessman, even though he was never an athlete, never did all the stuff that, someone like my son would. And yet that nerd ended up getting a better life outcome than my son did, which means, he just doesn't want it enough. My son's a failure because he couldn't get the big well-like success that I wanted him to. And you actually would be very surprised how many people suffer through mental health in this country. It's around 1 in 8 people, not in this country, all in the world. In the world, 1 in 8 people suffer from mental health, which is roughly 970 million people, which may not sound like a lot, but that makes up a good chunk of the world population, according to the World Health Organization. That's close to 1 billion people, considering how there's around 7 to 8 billion people in the world. That's a surprising amount of people who suffer from mental health.